First DBT meetup, really excited. We've been using DBT for about 4 months at Fastly. Really happy to be here and honored to be speaking in front of everyone. A quick show of hands, who isn't using DBT currently? Just does not have it. Okay, great. I hope this is going to be really good about why you might use DBT, what is DBT, and if you're familiar with DBT, hopefully I can keep you entertained long enough that pizza isn't your next best alternative. All right, so my name is, I go by T-Pug at work because there was already a Tyler when I joined. So I'll talk about that a little bit. What is Fastly? I'll talk about some complex problems, some creative solutions, my 2 favorite things, talk about our DBT instance, and what is next for Fastly. Okay, so I work in the business systems department with my boss's boss, Brian Flood, back there. He's really big on trust and perception, which are great things to learn. It's currently me and my boss, Rajan, who couldn't be here. He's traveling in India, but shout out to Rajan for starting in August, really getting ramped up. So a little bit about me. I like solving complex problems with creative solutions, and I like eradicating Stockholm syndrome of spreadsheets. Who has ever been really proud of a spreadsheet that they've been created? Right, yes, welcome to DBT. You can do that and more. I dislike nebulous error messages and @heres in general channels. You are my people. Yes, thank you, thank you. Quick side note, I made little emojis for @heres to troll people, so you can make emojis of @heres, so you can make whatever. I don't like @heres. All right, so what is Fastly? We are an edge cloud network. We have over 500 employees in 15 countries. We empower developers and their businesses to optimize content, to be closer to the customers. Our values entail we are good people with a curious spirit. If you want to know more about Fastly, you can talk to me afterwards. We're here to talk about DBT. All right, so curious spirit. To me, that often means people asking me specific questions about general data lacking critical dimensions. Ooh, that sounds really good, right? Fastly's curiosity is rarely satiated. So what that often means is that people come to me and they ask me questions, and they say, hey, I have this general question, this really specific thing about general data. Can you help me answer that? And I say, well, what are you working with? And they say, well, I've pulled this spreadsheet manually that I've done for the past 3 years. I need help replicating it. Okay, that's a big ask. The thing that happens though is if enough people ask you these questions, they're generally trying to get to the same thing, which is that they're trying to find an answer that is as complex as their question is. So they might want to know a very specific answer to a question, but the data isn't quite there. So I'm going to be talking about dimensionality in your reporting, and I'm going to talk about artificially creating complexity. Otherwise, people are going to continue that manual ad hoc process, which is really not great. So you might be thinking, artificial complexity. Don't we use DBT to reduce complexity in our reporting? Well, specific questions can be things like, how many products did we sell this quarter versus last quarter? It's not just 2 quarters that they want, right? They might want all time. They might be product X, but products A through V and Y and Z also have similar things. People want to know the same information, but it might not exist in someone's spreadsheet that they've created for 4 years. Do customers renew with more or less of product X? These are all things that when people ask you, hey, if you can show me quarter over quarter or month over month, why can't you answer these other really complex questions? So when you're talking about general data, they want to know, I want months to be able to roll up in quarters. I need more time in my data. I need more products. Give me every single product that we might have. If we take a step back, I don't need X, I need A through Z. And I might want to know all contract stages. Renewals might not be enough. I want to know how many customers were new, how many customers churned, how many customers did all these things. If I'm going to go through the steps to figure out the answer to that question, there's a lot more information I can provide by creating more complexity in my data. So I ask myself, what needs to exist? Sort of like a unified data DNA for our logic, wildcards, case fill-ins. And you might say, this is just like Jurassic Park, where they used frog DNA to fill in dinosaur DNA. And if you remember, that turned out really bad for the dinosaur build tool team. Fortunately, manipulating your data's complexity increases the power of transformations and answerable ad hoc queries. Rarely does your data go berserk and eat your entire DBT team. If it does ping Claire in events, she'll make you write a talk about it. Okay, so what makes a data problem complex? People might ask temporal questions. What's the percent change week over week for metric A? They want more granularity in their data. Metrics A sums might exist, right, in monthly increments, but not weeks. So they need daily samples. Their weeks don't exist in the concept of the data. So we might want to snapshot that data on a daily basis to compare them manually, which means we need data in days to roll up to weeks to roll up to months. Oftentimes we run into classification problems. What does the new process look like compared to the old process, right? But they still want to be able to compare directly the new process and the old process. So you need something that says, this is new, this is old. It's classification. You can have n number of similar yet independently created data sets that need to be in sync, right? We need a cohesive logic. So I need to be able to have some sort of classifier that can exist in my data. I might need to add categorical processing for multiple stages within data. So this might look like a case statement. So when you're trying to answer questions that require complex dimensions, then your underlying data's dimension must match that complexity or more complexity. Otherwise, you can't aggregate or simplify across multiple dimensions to yield greater insights, right? So I'm talking about, here's an example. People want to know products by opportunity and also by opportunity type at work, right? Simple, no big deal, product X. But we also want the sales team and the product family and close rates. Okay, yeah, no problem. Oh, by quarter and month, but also quarter over quarter and month over month, right? And the product lines themselves, right? The opportunities themselves are too overarching. We need the granular lines themselves, and we want to know, are they upsells? Are they downsells? Are they new lines? Are they retained, right? So this is sort of live complexity can occur in data sets. This data set that we were working on is not very large, but it's really dense and complex to answer questions. Okay, so for each opportunity, I need our process method, I need our type by sales category, and I need close details. For each product line item, I need a parent opportunity, qualitative metrics, and categorical definitions. So this is a little bit easier to understand in the flow chart. Try to obfuscate this a little bit, show you what's going on. So 94% of our new opportunities come through the middle, right? We have 3 rows and a very Brady Bunch-like factor, right? Our super type classifier, we have 3 different types. Quoted opportunity comes through the new system. Legacy standard opportunity, it's part of the old system. Legacy transfer opportunity was in the old system, or no, was in the new system, transferred to the old system, right? We want to know there are very distinct differences between just the old system or we're in the old system, need the new system, right? These are classifications that I need to know. So a quote exists if it's in the quoted opportunities. If no quote exists, it's legacy standard. And for our legacy transfer, the quote exists, but the primary is false. Okay, but within that, in that column, I want to know about those quoted opportunities. After all, they make up 94% of our data. So we have some opportunity types. We have renewal, auto renewals, or amendments. Those are basically customers that have purchased, they're buying again. We have new businesses and terminating contracts, which are basically entirely new contracts, but they yield different results in our line items, right? They're classified differently when they get down to the bottom of it. So line items could be new sell, upsell, downsell, retained, canceled, not an amendment or renewal, and we want a cohesive data set. So if a product starts in a legacy standard opportunity, I want to know what is the direction of that line item. Even if it doesn't come from the old system, a null is not an acceptable value when dealing with a report like that. It looks bad in counts. It looks bad when people are trying to classify things. It looks bad when you're trying to suppress those nulls. I need people to look at this report and know that this line item has no direction. They don't need to know that it comes from a legacy standard opportunity, but if they see no direction, they know where it came from. And of course, we also have no direction for our line item classifiers because for the same reason, they ended up in the legacy transfer opportunity bin. Okay, we also have some other types and we keep them in line with the classifiers because remember, we're trying to make a cohesive view of multiple different forms of output. Even though 94% of our data looks there, I can't give 94% of an answer and be told you're doing a good job, Tyler. Okay, so DBT comes into play. Let's build this data using a tool. But Tyler, how good are you with tools? Well, one of the things I like about DBT is when I'm building the data, I actually get to build the tool as well. I can select relevant fields from my BigQuery schema. I can get it exactly how I want it with SQL statements. I can group by anything, everything, and anything in between. I can union it with version control through Git, And I can use an ETL automation like Python. And responsive UI as choice, I prefer Visual Studio Code. It does a nice terminal inline there. It's really nice. Okay, so I know SQL. Doesn't impress people so much. I agree, Shania. All right, but dbt is more than just versioned SQL. It allows you to have flexible complexity. So our dbt transforms our data in ways that would be really tough with our other systems. Trying to make that flowchart in business logic in our visualization tool is really difficult. Doing that just in SQL and views, really tough. Forming giant case statements that I can have append and be pre-visualization, post-visualization, be able to handle the logic of different inputs, very important. And I can union more than I can just append different data sets together to be able to handle things. I can actually pull and source the fields I want, append them together, have logic based off that. And the leverage is BigQuery syntax. I love using BigQuery. It's very fantastic, very responsive, and the ability to look at what I expect my query to look like in the UI and then run in dbt, it's huge. It also has a lot of control with dbt. It forces documentation and accountability. I'm my own best coworker, but I'm also my laziest coworker, right? So documentation is super important. When I'm context switching between giant projects, I need to be able to come back to this model and be like, I know what was going on here. We have a Jira ticket for many commits, which really helps with the documentation and control. You can link Jira with your GitHub, so when you know how many commits feed to a single Jira ticket, which is nice. We also have a separation of test and production environments, so we push tests locally and push production in the cloud. And most importantly is all that business logic I just talked about between the products and the line items and the classification. It's in dbt, it's in versions. I can mess with it. Anyone on my team can mess with it, but no one else. And that control is very important when you're handling something like business logic. When it comes to leveraging reports of that products, when they go off and show, they know that this is locked down. No one's gonna go in and change it. And finally, the community is really great. Just the fact that we're having, you know, pizza together. We're having beer. This is really awesome. The Slack channel itself is really great. The past meetup talks are also really awesome. I recommend if you like this talk, if you like what you see here, go back and watch some of the other dbt meetups. They're really awesome. And dbt Slack. Is everyone here in dbt Slack? All right. It can be, it's a lot of users in there now, but it's tough to break in, but it's really great. If you can get in there, they use threads a lot and emojis, which are awesome. Really big fan, but it can be daunting. All right, so personally for myself, I really find dbt valuable with the error handling. This is a little timeline of our project. So we've only been using dbt for 4 months. I guess 5 at this point, who's counting. The Git init we started on the 9th. We loaded in there. Our CPQ project that we were handling went from the 19th to the 25th. You can see that kind of here. We had about 34 commits in 25 business days. And my favorite part about dbt is when it fails with the SQL, I know why it failed, I know where it failed, and I know how long it took. That's super great and super responsive for me as a team of one, knowing what's going on with that. And dbt docs, being able to auto-generate your documentation for that project or model that you're looking on. It makes really nice DAG charts, and the ability to just show that to people really gives them an underlying sense of what's going on in your schema. Being able to show them that in a responsive way for people who are used to schemas, they're used to visual diagrams, being able to see this is your data, this is where it's going in, this is what it looks like. Okay, but if you really need more reasons for dbt, one of the great things is that in 4 months, we had 0 difficult vendor negotiations. That's a huge win for me on a small team where we have a lot of approvals, figuring out which software to use. I didn't have to sit down and talk with a bunch of emails back and forth, download open source, got going. Also cheap, you know, it's easy to justify a tool that's, you know, open source. Shout out to dbt Cloud though, Claire's gonna ask me to do that. And we have about 16 tables going in, which are not a lot of tables, right? But it's BigQuery's best friend. I can isolate relevant fields. I can have the complexity and control over the data, especially if you're working with something like 5chan, you're pulling in entire schemas, being able to specify the fields that you want in the underlying tables can make a big difference. And we have 2 models, right? They're small and powerful, but they're filled with complex business logic. So that data set I was talking about is only about 4 significant digits, but it provides huge amounts of value to the company. And having that business logic controlled in the models, super great. And infinite value. Right? That's a sideways 8, but you know what I mean. I get a new tool, the company gets a new data set, everything works out great. Okay, so just to go over really quickly, this is what our sort of system likes, very obfuscated. We have our Fastly data, we have our EL systems, they load into Google BigQuery. Fastly data loads into the Fastly project, extract and load systems that our team is responsible for, loads into the BigQuery that we have, our private warehouse. We use dbt to transform that business logic, comes into complexity-rich data, that's transformed data, and then we pass that to our BI tools along with our Fastly data. We hope to get more Fastly data into there and just churning, but small team, working hard, impactful projects, complex data. Okay, so just ran through that really quickly and talk a little bit about what's next for business systems. So we're trying to get better models. To know how long it takes, how many fails happen before I'm actually able to push a model are super important for me to try and keep myself accountable, but also know when it's likely to mess up is something I'm really interested in. If anyone has help with like dbt logging, figuring out how to log your own commits and failures are really great. It's revolutionizing the way we implement business logic at reporting, and that's something that we'd like to champion as an actual part of dbt. The ability to control process. I know I champion it a lot, but it's different talking here versus in the company being able to talk about that. And defining naming conventions across our data pipeline. We're just implementing new tools. dbt is a big thing. We've been really ad hoc for a while. We're really interested in having an entire overarching naming scheme that comes from our source tables through our data warehouse to our dbt transformations and having that out of there. I like cleverly naming things, but I'm sure we need an actual like system for doing that. If anyone has any recommendations, that would be great. And incorporating best practices. Currently, dbt runs both models, and I know that's not great. So definitely looking for model isolation, especially when we start adding the third, fourth, and fifth models. That's something we're definitely interested in. Actually annotating our dbt documentation and documenting often with purpose in line. Great. So that's my talk. Thank you.